Yeah, I think, and highlighting I think you're right.
When we think about wildly successful businesses, we often focus on their great products, cool branding, and brilliant marketing. But there's an unsung hero in their success stories, the business behind the business that makes selling simple. For millions of entrepreneurs, that business is Shopify. Shopify is home to the #1 checkout on the planet. And here's the not-so-secret secret. With Shop Pay, they boost conversions up to 50%. That means fewer abandoned carts and more completed sales. Our marketing team uses Shopify every day to sell our merchandise, and we love how easy it is to add more items, ship products, and track conversions. In today's market, growth-minded businesses need a commerce solution that's just as flexible and dynamic as they are. Whether your customers are browsing your website, scrolling through social media, or wandering into your store, Shopify ensures you're ready to sell. Ready to elevate your business? Upgrade your business today and get the same checkout Daily Wire uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/JVP, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/JVP today to upgrade your selling. That's shopify.com/JVP.
And I say this as a conservative commentator myself who talks about these issues all the time, but you're correct that obviously we have not done an entirely sufficient job of making this point. And probably part of it is not highlighting the positives enough. And I mean, when it comes down to it, it's an issue of happiness. And I think that I think it's probably true, and maybe there's like rare exceptions, very rare exceptions, but it's probably true for almost everyone that you cannot be happy. You can't be truly happy alone. I mean, nobody can be truly happy entirely alone. And now most of us, unless you're on a desert island somewhere, and if you were on a desert island, you would go insane very quickly, actually, being that isolated. But most of us, we're not on a desert island, so none of us are actually completely alone. But I think it probably is true that the closer you are to being alone, the more happy you will be. And the farthest you can get from being alone is to have a spouse and children. Now, even then, there's like a certain element of aloneness, I guess, that just because we're human beings and we have our own minds, we in a certain way, there's always going to be that. There's going to be a certain feeling of like isolation, I think, that we're all capable of feeling, no matter how many people you surround yourself with. But as far as you can get from alone is to have a spouse and have children. And so that doesn't mean now there are plenty of people that have kids and are miserably unhappy. I just talked about the regretful parents in the Reddit forum. So I think it's more accurate to say that if you have a spouse, you have children, you have the opportunity for the greatest happiness that's available to human beings. Now you have to take advantage of that opportunity, but it's not necessarily going to be automatic, but you have the opportunity for it. I think about there's a movie called Into the Wild about Chris McCandless, who was a guy who left everything behind, I think it was back in the 90s, and burned his credit card, burned his license and his social security card, and just went off into the Alaskan wilderness by himself, left society entirely behind. And then when he was up in the wilderness, he ended up eating a poison berry accidentally, and he died up in the wilderness by himself. And in the margins of his notebook, before he died, he wrote something like, "Happiness isn't real unless it's shared." And I think that's true. And I mean, he learned it. He learned it the hard way. He learned it the hardest way you could possibly learn a lesson like that. But there is no happiness unless you're sharing it. I feel this. I travel a lot for my job, as I know you do. And people say to me all the time, "Well, it must be nice that you get to go out and travel and see the world, and you get a break from the wife and kids." And the truth is that when I'm traveling, I'm going to do a job. Even if I'm in a really cool place, I don't go do a lot of sightseeing. And on the few occasions when I do get out and do something kind of fun on my own, it's not that fun anymore, because I don't have, all I can think to myself is, I wish I had my kids here, I wish I had my wife here to see this, because they really enjoy it, and because I can't share that moment with them. It's nice, but it's just lacking a certain quality that it could otherwise have.
So our whole culture, insofar as our culture is Judeo-Christian, and it's particularly emphasized on the Christian side, our whole culture is predicated on the idea of sacrifice, right? That's why we have the crucifixion at the center of our culture as a symbol. It's a symbol. You're pointing to why. Find the meaning in your life in the sacrifice of your solitude and your narrow self to the future and to the broader community. And it really is in that where we find not only our happiness, Matt, which you pointed to, so our hope for the future, let's say, our enthusiasm and our courage, we also find our respite from anxiety. There's no difference between being self-conscious and being anxious. They're statistically indistinguishable from one another. The more you think about yourself, the more miserable you are. And so it is the case, and human beings are so deeply social that we can punish psychopathic predators by putting them in isolation. Just think about that, what that means for how social people are. You can take the worst people, the most predatory people, the repeat violent offenders who can't regulate themselves at all, who act like they hate everyone and do nothing but pray. And if you put them in solitary, they find that torturous. That's how social human beings are. You know, in your observation that you only find realistic meaning in communal experience. It's like I feel the same way when I'm traveling. I mean, I take my wife along and we often have family members and friends along, and that makes a huge difference. But I'm just not that interested in having fun without my wife, mostly because it's just not that fun. You know, I'm not tuning, for Christ's sake. I'm not searching for immediate gratification. It's shallow. And we have a crisis of meaning in our society, and it is because people don't understand the relationship between responsibility, like long-term committed responsibility, and meaning. That's where all of it is to be found. And that's even true as you get older. Like, I can't imagine what my life would be like now if I didn't have my kids and my grandkids and my wife. Like, what the hell? What am I going to be doing? Something trivial and pointless to while away the time. It's so dull and dry. There's no depth in it at all. And like conservatives have done a terrible job of showing young people that commitment and meaning are the same thing. It's so interesting to watch this because I've noticed when I lecture that whenever I draw a relationship between responsibility and meaning, the audience always goes dead silent because no one's made that case, least of all the conservatives who are always on about duty. And, you know, you did a much better job today than the typical conservative, let's say, in highlighting what you find so spectacularly positive about having a family. You know, it also does a lot for your genuine regard for yourself, you know, because if you can view yourself as somebody who's reliable and committed in the face of all of life's catastrophes, and that you can keep your word across time, then you're not some miserable, cringing milksop of a thing that's blowing in the wind and crushed by every one of life's minor tragedies, right? You're trying to live out a pattern of someone who can take a fair bit of battering and still prevail and be a model of that sort to your kids, which they look to you for. Part of the reason your boys torture you and push you is to find out what you're made of. Your wife does the same thing, and you know, maybe you can find out that you're made of more than you think if put a little committed effort into the situation. So let's turn to the move. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
I was going to say that's an interesting point, because I was thinking about it the other day that I agree with what you said at the beginning of the conversation, that you don't really grow up until you get kids. I certainly see that in my own life. And I got married when I was 25, had kids when I was first set of twins when I was 26. And I look at my life up to the age of 25, and I see all of that as basically childhood. I look at myself at 22, and it's like I might as well have been 12 in a lot of ways, because for me, adulthood started once I was actually a husband and then a father. And I think, and also for me, even in the culture, we're always told that having a family is going to prevent you from being financially successful, because it's an extra financial burden. And it is more of a financial burden, quote unquote, if you want to put it that way. But it hasn't been my experience that it prevents success. In fact, my own career didn't really take off until the moment when I had kids. And there's almost like a starting point right there, and I could draw a line going up from that moment. And I think part of the reason for all of that is that, to the point you just made, that I really started to take myself a lot more seriously when I was a husband and a father. I mean, I had the responsibility to care for my family, but I also just started to see myself as a grown man in the world, and take myself a lot more seriously. And I think that, especially as a man, that's one of the prerequisites to, being successful is to see yourself as a serious person, which I think a lot of young men probably don't see themselves that way. And then as a consequence, the world doesn't see them that way.
You're probably not a serious person until it's about more than you. And that means you don't bring grim seriousness of intent to your pursuits. And the developmental literature is very clear on this. Like, most young men are quite profligate and hedonistic, let's say, with regard to their consumption of alcohol. And why? Well, because it's fun. We like to think that people drink to drink away their misery, and there is some truth to that because it is a good respite from anxiety. But most people drink to party and have a good time, to engage in hedonistic stupidity in various forms. And the reason that people do that is obvious. They do that because the substances like alcohol that people use are physiologically rewarding. They activate the dopaminergic systems. That's the same system that's activated when you're pursuing a worthwhile goal. The real question is, well, why not just drink and use cocaine all the goddamn time? And the answer to that people usually come up with around the age you did is that they take on responsibility and decide that that's actually more worthwhile. And so then young men do start to take themselves seriously and to work, and then it doesn't matter that they're burdened by the obligations of a family, because that's actually something that becomes motivating. And so it's not a burden, it's an opportunity to mature and to show that you're capable of a hell of a lot more than you thought you were if you just stop doing all the stupid things that were interfering with your life. And so what's the consequence? What has been the consequence for you personally in taking on that additional responsibility? You said you regard yourself as a child or an overgrown teenager until you got married. So what has been the consequence for you of starting to take your own life with some degree of mature seriousness?
Well, the consequence for me has been entirely positive. I mean, it's I say that there's a starting point from when I had kids to now, and I can draw almost like not a straight line up, but you can see the incline from there. And it's not quite as simple as that, but I can trace all of whatever success I've had in life, both career-wise, financially, spiritually, pretty much in every sense. I can start it there from starting a family and realizing that everything I'm doing really matters, because it's not just for me. I guess that was a big part of the problem when I can think back. I moved out of the house when I was 20 years old. So not too early, but also early compared to a lot of people these days. I moved out when I was 20, got married when I was 25. So there's almost exactly 5 years in between when I was living on my own, but I was single. I wasn't married. And and there was an opportunity for a lot of the partying and all the profligate stuff that you talk about. There's some of that, but mainly as a time of it was a very miserable time. I was not happy. And I think it's because I didn't say I had a job. I was working at the job. I was trying to advance in my career, but then I come home to this empty apartment and there's just nobody there. And it doesn't really matter to anyone else what I do or whether I succeed at all. And I found that to be quite burdensome. It was much more burdensome than having a family. Like, having a family actually lifts that burden. Because coming home and just knowing that it's like, it doesn't matter to anyone in the world, really, except for my parents. And they're not as invested in it as, say, your kids and your wife will be. It just doesn't matter to anyone whether I'm successful. And I just found it, maybe there's a way to push through that. Maybe there's a way. I mean, there are people
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I don't believe it. Because why? Like, what's the point? And that's very important, because there's lots of suffering in life. And so if there isn't a point, man, good luck to you. And the point seems to be in something like the adoption of maximal responsibility. That's the story of all our great adventure stories, our great romantic adventure stories. The hero is always the person who takes on maximal responsibility. Always. Right? Like Frodo to destroy the ring of power. Well, there's a maximal responsibility. He fleshes out his whole character in the course of his quest so that he can contend with the all-seeing eye of the totalitarian state and the terrible burden of power. There's a reason those stories echo.
I guess the only caveat I would make here is that I think in some cases it is possible to have a happy and successful life where you have responsibilities or fulfilling your responsibilities, have a sense of purpose and meaning. It is possible to have that and to not get married and not have kids. There are some people that I believe are called to forego that. But in those cases, that means that if we're talking about a man, that means that they're going to find another outlet for this kind of paternal. As a man, I think we're all called to some kind of paternal service in the world. And for most men, that means having kids. And if you can't have kids, it means adopting. That's going to be most men. There are going to be some men, though, a small minority, who aren't called to that. And so they find some. But you have to find some other way to kind of act as a father in the world. And as a Catholic, I would say one of the best examples that maybe you're called to the religious life. Maybe you're called to be a priest or a monk. A joyful life, but that is also it's like you're not just working some job and trying to get money for yourself and then coming home to your empty apartment. We call a priest father, so you are a father in a spiritual sense. So there is that, but I think the point is that you can't discard that entirely and say, I don't want to be in service to anyone. I don't want to be a father in any sense of the term at all. I don't want to have anyone depending on me at all. And I just want to focus on myself and have fun. If that's your mentality, there's just no way to be truly happy, except in those fleeting moments that you talk about. But
right, and you'll get more and more desperate to pursue those fleeting moments too. That's the cataclysmic abyss of hedonism.
Did you know there's nearly $1 trillion of infrastructure and pandemic funds yet to be spent? That's right, there's a whole heap of money that the lame duck administration is pushing hard to spend in their last few months. If the president is able to push these funds out, we could see another prolonged inflation surge, just like we saw during COVID. And I'm sure you remember the terrible effects that high prices had on most Americans. But there is hope. A surge in price can be beaten. A gold IRA from Birch Gold Group is the ultimate inflation hedge for your savings in uncertain times. To see how to protect your IRA or 401k, get your free info kit on gold by texting the word Jordan to 989898. And there's more good news. Due to enormous demand, Birch Gold is offering the 24-karat gold-plated truth bomb on qualifying purchases for 1 more month. But you need to text Jordan to 989898 to claim your eligibility before September 30th. Don't wait for the president's spending spree to tank the dollar further. Protect your financial future with gold. Text Jordan to the number 989898 to claim your eligibility and make your purchase before September 30th. That's Jordan to 989898 today.
Because those will also get more and more rare the more you pursue them. I talked to Jocko Willink. Jocko wanted to be a mayhem distributing soldier from the time he was about 3. And you can tell that by just looking at him, because he's such a monster, and I imagine he was a boy that was quite difficult to socialize, right? Because there are lots of boys who are, 5% of boys kick, hit, bite, and steal at the age of 2. Very few girls, by the way, but about 5% of boys. Most of those boys are socialized by the age of 4, by the way. And most of the people who are miserable with their kids have no idea how to discipline them, right? So it's like they're not living with 3 kids, they're living with 3 unhouse-trained, stupid attack dogs. And it's no bloody wonder that they're miserable, because they're too fragmented and clueless and poorly educated and undisciplined to have any understanding at all what it means to bring your children to acceptable social order. And so that's a complete catastrophe. I mean, it's It's obviously the case that dysregulated relationships make your life hell. But that doesn't mean, as you pointed out, that that's implicitly the case, because you don't have to let your children run roughshod over you. It doesn't take that much. Jesus, how much discipline does it take for a grown man to bring a 3-year-old into alignment? I mean, he's 3. You can probably take him, both psychologically and physically. And if you can't, well, then you're a coward fundamentally, or you've had very bad models. In any case, Jocko, when he went off to be the special forces character that he developed into, discovered very quickly that he really liked mentoring, and that was way better than just, what would you say, living for the sake of adventurous mayhem. And that was a real profound realization on his part, that there wasn't anything better he could find to do with his life, his like monstrous Viking life. Easily could have been a criminal, right? Taking that pathway because he's got that aggressive temperament. He found that there was nothing better that he could find than to mentor young men. And that's to adopt that paternal role. There is a deep source of meaning in that. And that's the spirit of the patriarch that's celebrated in the biblical stories. It's part of the manifestation of the spirit of the God of Isaac and Abraham. That long-term paternal focus that's committed, and the opposite of idiot hedonism and pride, so which is celebrated for months now in our society at a time. So, Matt, let's take a turn to your movie. You want to walk people through that a bit? I saw it, by the way, and it looks to me like you'll have the same kind of radical success with it that you did with What is a Woman. You've got this everyman quality about you, I think it's true, by the way. I mean, there is some of that about you, but you also do a good job of being a naive investigator into the crazy world of ideological possession. Do you want to walk us through the movie a little bit?
Sure. We decided of course we had What is a Woman, and it was very successful for us, and we're thinking about, this is going back 2 years ago, thinking about what topic do we want to tackle next and how to tackle it. And for me, it was very clear I wanted to get into, we talked about, we did the movie, we investigated gender, broadly speaking. Race is the other big one culturally. And so I knew I wanted to investigate that. The question was, how do you approach it? And with What is a Woman, the strategy is right in the title. It's this one basic question that the whole thing hinges on. Now, with race, it's not quite like that. There isn't one. There's a lot of questions. There's not one basic one. It's just a different beast in a lot of ways. And so, and we also didn't want to repeat we didn't want to do What is a Woman, but with race. So this time we thought it'd be interesting to take a different approach, and that is to start this naive investigator asking questions. The only difference here is that What is a Woman is kind of a blank slate the whole way through, just asking questions, not having any real position on it myself in the film until the very, very end. And this one we thought, I start by asking questions. And rather than remaining a blank slate and remaining skeptical, I'll just believe whatever I'm told. So they'll give me an answer and I'll accept that. And then I'll let that answer lead me to the next place. And that's the strategy we took with this. And it kind of takes us, and we really did approach it in filming this way, so that we had a really broad outline of where we wanted to go with the film, where we wanted to end up, but we can't really script it out because we go to talk to someone, we don't know exactly what they're going to say or how it's going to go. And so this is why filming it was over a year was a long process, because we kind of let the story went down the rabbit hole that way. And in the process, because I'm kind of believing what these anti-racist DEI people are telling me, and sort of adopting their views and trying to put them into practice. So that was the goal, is to not just ask them about it, but to take what they say, put it into practice on screen, so that people can see it, and so it's a much more direct, I think, way of kind of satirizing these ideas, maybe even than we did in What is a Woman.
You got DEI certified. Okay, so a couple of comments. So you adopt a persona, you've got a man bun. I've got a hint for you if you ever do this again, is you have to learn to uptalk at the end of your sentences. You have to make every sentence into something that sounds like a question, because your voice gives you away, because you've got this flat, authoritative voice, like you just make declarative statements. There's no question in them. And one of the things you'll notice about the DEI types, this is very telling, is that they always end every sentence with an uptalk. It's a form of validation seeking, and you're belied by your authoritative voice as a DEI specialist. So you might want to give that some consideration when you're trying to pass for one of the people who you're investigating. Anyways, you went and got DEI certification, so I'm kind of wondering if that might be handy for you to re-educate me. And so, and also, since I seem to be destined now to being re-educated by DEI specialists, you took that training. What the hell was that like?